Welcome to Mind Decoded, where we explore the psychology behind human behavior. Let's decode today's topic. You say yes when you mean no. You answer work emails at midnight. You help people who never help you back. You feel guilty when you prioritize your needs. And you wonder why you're exhausted, resentful, and stretched too thin. This isn't kindness. This is boundary failure. And psychologist Nedra Glover-Tawwab's research shows that people without boundaries don't actually help others more effectively. They just burn out faster while enabling everyone around them to take without giving. Here's what boundaries actually are. Boundaries are the limits you set on how others can treat you, what you'll do for others, and how much access others have to your time, energy, and resources. Psychologist Henry Cloud defines them as property lines for your life. They're not walls that keep people out. They're gates that you control. You decide who gets in, when they get in, and what they can ask for once they're in. People without boundaries leave all their gates open all the time. Then they wonder why they're overwhelmed. Before we begin, a quick disclaimer. This content is for educational and informational purposes only and should not be considered medical, psychological, or mental health advice. If you're experiencing mental health concerns, please consult with a qualified mental health professional. Let's start with why setting boundaries feels so hard. Your brain has a negativity bias. Psychologist Roy Baumeister found that negative interactions affect you more strongly than positive interactions. When you set a boundary, you risk a negative reaction. The other person might get upset, angry, or disappointed. Your brain weighs that possible negative outcome heavily. The positive outcome, protecting your time and energy, feels abstract and distant. The negative outcome, their immediate reaction, feels concrete and threatening. Your brain chooses avoiding the concrete negative over gaining the abstract positive. People-pleasing is often learned in childhood. Psychologist Lindsay Gibson's research on emotional immaturity shows that children raised by emotionally immature parents learn to prioritize others' needs over their own. When your parents' mood determined your safety, you learned to manage their emotions. You became hyper-aware of their needs. You suppressed your own needs to avoid conflict. This pattern continues into adulthood. You're still managing everyone else's emotions. You're still suppressing your needs. But now you're doing it voluntarily, without realizing it's a learned pattern you can unlearn. Guilt is the emotional barrier to boundaries. When you say no, you feel guilty. Psychologist June Tangney distinguishes between healthy guilt and unhealthy guilt. Healthy guilt happens when you violate your own values. You promised to help someone move and you forgot. That guilt is appropriate. Unhealthy guilt happens when you prioritize your legitimate needs over someone else's wants. You say no to working late because you have plans. That guilt is irrational, but your brain produces it anyway because you've learned that taking care of yourself is selfish. The obligation mindset makes boundaries harder. You think if someone asks, you're obligated to help. If someone needs something, you're required to provide it. Psychologist Harriet Breiker calls this the disease to please. You treat other people's requests as commands. But requests aren't commands. Someone asking doesn't create an obligation. You're allowed to decline requests that don't work for you. The other person is allowed to be disappointed. Their disappointment doesn't mean you did something wrong. Fear of conflict drives boundary avoidance. Psychologist John Gottman found that people who avoid all conflict often have worse relationships than people who engage in productive conflict. When you never say no, resentment builds. Eventually, you explode over something small. Or you withdraw emotionally. Or the relationship becomes one-sided and dies. Setting boundaries early and calmly prevents the resentment that destroys relationships. But your brain doesn't see it that way. It sees boundary setting as creating conflict. It doesn't recognize that avoiding boundaries creates worse conflict later. The reciprocity assumption is usually wrong. You help everyone expecting they'll help you when you need it. Psychologist Robert Cialdini's research on reciprocity shows that this works with people who value reciprocity. But many people don't. They take without any intention of giving back. When you set no boundaries, you attract takers. People who respect boundaries self-select out. People who ignore boundaries self-select in. You end up surrounded by people who take advantage of your boundary-less generosity. Then you resent them for doing exactly what you trained them to do. Boundary setting requires clarity before communication. You need to know what your boundary is before you can state it. Psychologist Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication framework emphasizes this. Define the boundary clearly. I don't answer work emails after 6 p.m. I don't lend money to friends. I need 1 hour alone after work before engaging with family. The specificity matters. Vague boundaries like I need more respect can't be enforced because nobody knows what they mean. Clear boundaries can be stated, understood, and respected. The boundary statement doesn't require justification. This is where most people fail. They say no, then spend 10 minutes explaining why. The explanation invites negotiation. When you justify, the other person can argue with your reasons. You don't have time? I'll make it quick. You're tired? This won't take long. Every justification is a weak point they can attack. Psychologist Nedra Glover-Tawwab teaches a simple script. No, I can't do that. Or, no, that doesn't work for me. Then stop talking. The silence feels uncomfortable. Your brain wants to fill it with explanations. Don't. Let them sit with your no. Boundaries need consequences to work. Stating a boundary without enforcing it teaches people the boundary is negotiable. Psychologist Henry Cloud calls this the boundary without teeth. If you say I don't answer texts after 9 p.m., then answer a text at 10 p.m., you've taught the person that your boundary is a suggestion, not a limit. The consequence doesn't need to be harsh. It just needs to be consistent. After 9 p.m., I don't respond until morning. Then actually don't respond. Your consistency trains others that your boundaries are real. The guilt will happen and that's okay. When you first start setting boundaries, you'll feel guilty. That's expected. Your brain has years of conditioning that saying no is bad. That conditioning doesn't disappear immediately. Psychologist Kristin Neff's research on self-compassion shows that acknowledging the guilt without letting it control your behavior is the path forward. Yes, I feel guilty. And I'm still saying no. The guilt is a feeling, not a fact. You don't have to obey every feeling your brain produces. Start with low-stakes boundaries to build the skill. Don't begin by setting a major boundary with your demanding parent. Start with saying no to optional social events. Declining to help a coworker with something non-urgent. Psychologist B.J. Fogg's research on behavior change shows that starting small builds the neural pathways for the bigger behavior. Each small boundary you set successfully makes the next one easier. You're training your brain that setting boundaries doesn't destroy relationships. Most people respect clear boundaries once they understand you're serious. Different relationships require different boundaries. Your boundary with your boss looks different from your boundary with your friend. Psychologist John Gottman emphasizes context-appropriate boundaries. With your boss, the boundary might be I need clear deadlines and expectations communicated in writing. With your friend, it might be I need you to listen sometimes instead of always talking about yourself. The principle is the same. You define what you need for the relationship to work. The specific boundary varies based on the relationship. Boundaries are not ultimatums. An ultimatum is stop doing this or I leave. A boundary is this is what I need, and this is how I'll respond if it's not respected. Psychologist Harriet Lerner distinguishes between controlling others versus controlling your response to others. You can't control whether your coworker respects your time. You can control whether you respond to their requests outside work hours. You can't control whether your friend stops being flaky. You can control whether you keep making plans with them. Boundaries put the control where it belongs. With you. Cultural and family norms complicate boundaries. In some cultures, saying no to family is considered disrespectful. Psychologist Jennifer Freyd's work on betrayal trauma shows that family systems often punish boundary setters to maintain dysfunctional patterns. Your family might react badly when you set boundaries. That doesn't mean the boundaries are wrong. It means the family system relied on you having no boundaries. Healthy systems adjust to accommodate boundaries. Unhealthy systems try to punish them away. Here's what happens when you set consistent boundaries. Initially, people test them. They push to see if you're serious. If you hold firm, most people adjust. The ones who don't adjust are showing you they don't respect your needs. That information is valuable. Relationships where both people respect boundaries are sustainable. Relationships where one person refuses to respect boundaries eventually fail. Boundaries don't destroy good relationships. They reveal which relationships were one-sided all along. The practical framework is simple. First, identify where you're overextended. Where do you feel resentful? Exhausted? Taken advantage of? That's where you need boundaries. Second, define the boundary clearly and specifically. Third, communicate it without justification. Fourth, enforce it consistently with predetermined consequences. Fifth, tolerate the guilt without letting it change your behavior. Understanding that boundaries aren't selfish changes everything. Boundaries aren't about keeping people out. They're about sustainable relationships. When you protect your energy, you have energy to genuinely help when it matters. When you say no to things that drain you, you can say yes to things that align with your values. The people who respect your boundaries stick around. The people who don't, leave. And that's exactly how it should be. And that's how the mind works. If this helped you understand yourself better, subscribe for weekly psychology insights. Thanks for watching.